who didn't want his precious humans going extinct. The Yuletide. Throw the Yule log on the fire. The word Yule is synonymous with Christmas and, for some reason, logs. But what does it even mean? You'll be surprised to find out that Yule was an ancient winter festival celebrated by pagan tribesmen before the invention of Christianity. Germanic paganism was all the rage in the Dark Ages, even when Christianity was dominating Rome and the New East. The modern definition of Yule is the feast of the Nativity of Jesus Christ, better known as Christmas. In the Dark Ages, it was a midwinter festival connected to the Norse god Odin. Germanic tribes would get together around the winter solstice to do a lot of feasting and a lot of merrymaking. If you looked into a Germanic home on the night of Christmas Eve 1500 years ago, you'd see a familiar sight. A drunk uncle, a large roasting beast, a decorated tree, and maybe even some gifts. You would also see some things that are less familiar, like a bloody sacrifice for Odin and the other Norse gods. Although I guess that depends on what your Christmas celebrations look like. Maybe you and your family do leave offerings to Odin and his pals. Everyone celebrates the holidays a little differently. In the British Isles, the Celts celebrated their own version of Yule. Their celebrations also involved sacrifice and something a little more romantic and closer to home. Druid priests would sacrifice a white bull, then they would gather mistletoe as part of the celebration. But what was the cause of celebrating Yule? Did it have anything to do with a baby born of a virgin? Surprisingly enough, it didn't. Up until the 16th century, winter was a brutal time in Europe. During the frigid months, livestock would often perish from famine. So to prevent famine and avoid having to feed the cattle, most cows would be slaughtered. When this happened around December 25th, tribes suddenly had a massive amount of meat. They would stuff their faces at the Feast of Jule, or Yule, which lasted 12 days. 12 is a familiar number, isn't it? Jesus Christ happened to have 12 disciples. There are also 12 signs of the zodiac. A little suspicious, don't you think? The Yule celebration was also about the rebirth of the sun. Even though the days were getting colder moving into January, the days were also getting longer. The resurrection of the sun was a big part of Yule, just as the resurrection of Jesus Christ is a big part of Christmas today. The difference is that Yule came first. Jesus the Buddhist, Part 1. What do you think about Jesus Christ being a Buddhist? If you're not comfortable with the idea, I have some bad news. The Christian Messiah may have been a Buddhist monk trying to spread Buddhism in Jerusalem. Imagine if you picked up a book from the library, started reading, and suddenly some of the pages were missing. This is how it feels to read the New Testament. The Bible talks all about Jesus Christ being born and being a young boy. But then there's a random pause, and it picks up again with Jesus turning 30. Nobody knows what Jesus was doing from the age of 12 to 29. The 18 years are known as the silent years of Jesus. The Bible doesn't have any information about what he did as a teenager or how he lived out his 20s. 18 years is a long time. He must have been doing something. One theory is that he worked as a carpenter in Galilee. But without the Bible giving an explanation, scholars have come up with their own answers. One of the most popular theories, backed up by proof I'm going to give to you in a second here, is that Jesus went on a spiritual journey. He visited India and Nepal. He studied with Hindus and Buddhists. And when he returned to Judea, Jesus' head was filled with new ideas. He wanted to spread those ideas, but his radical teachings got him crucified. I guess people in the first century didn't like new ways of thinking. But just what proof is there that Jesus was trying to teach people Buddhist theory? That's coming up very soon. And now for number 10. But first I wanted to give a big shout out to Curious and Justin House. Thanks so much for the kind words and for supporting OE. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. The Mother Goddess and the Flood. Nua is the mother goddess in Chinese mythology. Unlike in most ancient religions, Chinese myth has the creator of humanity being a woman. Her similarities with various pieces of Christianity are going to lead you down a Google rabbit hole of Chinese mythology after this video. Where do I even start with this bizarre goddess? She appears in images as a serpent with the head of a woman. The earliest myths of Nua claim that she created the first human beings from yellow clay. But she got tired, so she dipped some rope into the mud and swung it around above her head. The globs of mud that splattered the earth became the first men and women. Nuwa was also associated with the myth of virgin birth. Early Chinese legends said that women didn't need men to get pregnant. Childbirth was thought of as a miraculous occurrence, much like how Jesus Christ was conceived through the Immaculate Conception. Nuwa is already connected to the serpent in the Garden of Eden because of her depiction as a snake. Just like God in the Old Testament, she made men from the soil of the earth. She also saved humanity from a mythical flood. Nuwa's role in the Chinese flood myth is a little different from God's role in the Old Testament flood. She wasn't the one who caused the flood, but the one who saved humanity from it. The water god Gong Gong broke one of the pillars holding up the sky, causing floods to spread across the world. But Nuwa saved humanity by tearing a hole in the sky and lifting humans from the water. The fish. This symbol is recognizable immediately by anyone who sees it. What I'm going to tell you about the Jesus fish though, well, let's just hope you're ready for it. The fish symbol you see on magnets slapped to bumper stickers didn't originate with Christianity. The symbol is synonymous with Christ today, but it used to be synonymous with a woman's womb. Look at the so-called Jesus fish for a long second and try to figure out what it really is, because as you may have guessed, it's not really a fish. The symbol is a pair of overlapping crescent moons. These were initially used as a symbol of a woman's monthly cycle. In early Babylonian mythology, there's a story of a fish that pushed a giant egg out of the river Euphrates. From the egg emerged a mermaid, a mighty goddess of fertility and the ocean named Atargatis. She would later give birth to a son named Ichthys. In ancient times, the Jesus fish was known as the Ichthys symbol. In Greek, the word Ichthys translates directly to fish. It appeared in the Christian world starting in the 2nd century AD. If you're a little confused, it's totally understandable. The main takeaway is that the famous Jesus fish began as a symbol of fertility. It's still a symbol of fertility in the modern pagan world. It's not even supposed to be a fish, it's a womb. Kalki the Destroyer. Almost all religions have a harbinger of the apocalypse. In Christianity, it's the Antichrist. In the Hindu religion, which predates Christianity in case you didn't know, it's Kalki, the final incarnation of Vishnu. The fable of the Hindu apocalypse shares some enlightening similarities with Christianity's end of days. Before I can tell you about the similarities, I have to wade through some pretty substantial differences. The Hindu belief system says that time is separated into 4 vast periods, called yugas. The 4th period, Kali Yuga, started 5,000 years ago and is a whopping 432,000 years long. Some simple math tells me we have 427,000 years left before the end of time. I will admit that the time frame doesn't match even a little bit with Christianity, but the details surrounding the Kali Yuga and the apocalypse are similar. It's said that at the beginning of the Kali Yuga, Lord Krishna disappeared from the earth just like Jesus Christ ascended to heaven. In Krishna's absence, people became obsessed with greed and materialism. Governments became corrupt, human decency eroded, and crime ran rampant. People fought against each other, and wars broke out everywhere. This kind of sounds like what's happening today and what's honestly been happening for the last 2,000 years. Hindu religion says that the world will become so foul that Kalki the Destroyer will arrive to herald the end of times. He'll descend from heaven brandishing a fiery sword and riding upon his white steed. In the book of Revelation, Jesus Christ is one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Jesus is the one who rides from heaven on a white horse to conquer the evils of the world. He and Kalki both ride white horses, and they're both intent on punishing the wicked. I won't say that Jesus Christ is a copy of Kalki, but I think you and I can both agree that their involvement in the apocalypse is strikingly similar. White horses, flaming swords, and defeating evil. Harut, Marut, and the temptation of sin. I'm going to tell you a story about 2 angels that will leave you breathless. But I have to warn you that the story doesn't come from Christian mythology. It's not a tale you're going to find in the Bible. It comes from the Quran, with its origin being much, much older. The angels are Harut and Marut. From their stations in heaven, they look down on the humans of earth and ridicule them for their weakness. They laugh and point at the pitiful mortals entrenched in sin. They ridicule men and women for being so weak and unable to resist temptation. God comes to Harut and Marut, telling them that they would act the same if they were mortals upon the earth. Not believing God, the angels make a wager. They say that of course they'll be able to resist temptation because they're not as foolish as mortal men. So God sends the angels to earth, and what do you think happens? They resist temptation. For, about 30 full seconds. They're almost immediately seduced by a beautiful woman. During the seduction, somebody witnesses what the angels are doing. Enraged, the angels kill the man. By the end of the night, Harut and Marut succumb to murder, fornication, and excess wine. The angels have no choice but to admit they were wrong. They couldn't resist temptation, and as punishment, they're condemned to hang by their feet at the bottom of a well until the apocalypse. The story is meant to reinforce the idea that the human world is corrupt, and even angels are not immune to its evils. But what I want to tell you about is the origin of the story. Although it first appears in the Quran, it has parallels in more ancient religions. The story of Harut and Marut is just like the Jewish tale of the fallen angels Uzzah and Azael. The strongest connection is the oldest. In the ancient Zoroastrian religion of Persia, created 4,000 years ago, there's a story about two fallen archangels. They're named Haruvatat and Ameratat. Haruvatat sounds dangerously close to Harut, doesn't it? Jesus the Buddhist, Part 2. Was Jesus a Buddhist or not? I promised evidence, and here it is. The first thing you need to know is that Buddhism was already in Judea at the time Jesus Christ held his ministry. Judea was a popular shipping center, with merchants from India and the West congregating there. There would have been a lot of different religions in Judea.